at the base of the plant begin to crack when bulbing begins. So at the base, the soil starts to crack, obviously because it is expanding, and yellow leaves yellow and fall over. Depending on the maturity of your onions, you can actually purposely bend it back, but you have to know when. All right, you need to know basically how long your crop has been out there. You don't purposely go and bend back any and every onion. You need to know when your crop has been out there, and by touching the base of the neck, you can feel a softer spot in that base, then you can go ahead and bend it over. If everything seems solid in there, it means that your bulb is still forming, your leaves are still good, so don't touch that one. But when it has that softer spot, the bulb, that's it. No more leaves are coming up, and you can go ahead and bend it over. After a few days, the bulb can be pulled and left in the soil surface to begin curing. Curing once again, drying, in other words, to begin closing up that neck. And closing up the neck means proper storage, avoiding any diseases after you have actually pulled them. Any damaged onions should be cooked and consumed right away because they're not going to store. So that's a waste of time. So make sure that you cook those ones first, or use them in seasoning or something like that, but you get rid of them first. Onions should be cured for several weeks before storing. This can be done outdoors by placing them on plastic sheets off of the ground, under cover if it is wet, if the conditions are wet. All right, because obviously you can't do it on wet. Once again, diseases, rotten, etc. All right, so this is an indication of when the onion is ready to harvest. You can see here the neck has already bent. It has a broken neck. So when the bulbs are mature, you see that falls over. All of these are actually ready for pulling because, one, you can see the size, you can see how the ground looks, but apart from that, the major indication is the broken neck. How you harvest will determine how long your onions, or any vegetable, how long they're stored. When you harvest, you pull the onions in the morning, all right, and let them air dry until late afternoon. Be sure to pick a day when the rain is not going to be falling. All right, you need to know. You need to watch the weather. You need to know. And don't leave them out so long that the dew actually falls on them. Any piece of water will do damage. Move them out into shade. Move them into shade on hot days. With that advice there, they can become sun-spoiled, and like a sunburn. They can become sunburn, and that does even more damage. All right? So you don't want that either. Here you can actually see it being harvested and put directly into sacks. But some people, I guess we will go into that a little later, would actually leave it in the field. You need to turn your onions frequently during field curing. This is called windrowing. We'll get into that. It's like when they're cured, you harvest them, you leave them out in the field to dry or cure, but you need to turn them so that they don't get sun-spoiled. All right? Avoid windrowing, as I explained, during periods of wet weather. Handle bulbs carefully at harvest to minimize damage. Keep bulbs continuously dry after harvest. So windrowing can also be done during the drying process. Cover the bulbs of one onion with the leaves of another, so it's sort of like an interlapping thing to prevent sun spoil. Avoid this practice during wet weather to avoid the promotion of fungal diseases. All right, turning your onions frequently while they're drying is also helpful. If you dry your onions indoor, be sure to spread them out in a well-ventilated area with plenty of room for airflow between the onions. So they need to have plenty space so that they can dry properly. All right? If you don't do that, you're encouraging fungus. You're encouraging them to be moist, because one set of moisture will travel through. All right? Drying indoors may take longer than outdoors, obviously, but 2 to 3 weeks is usually sufficient for full circulation. The drying process is complete when the neck of the onion is tight. The outer skin is dry, and it makes a rustling sound when handled, and the skin color is uniform. And I will take you back to a good characteristic of an onion from when we first started. When we first started, we saw how it was supposed to be. And that's what we were looking for. So this is what windrowing would look like. You basically harvest the onions, you leave them in the field, let the sun do some natural drying for you. In this case, you're seeing it here, and this one you see when they're actually overlapped. This now is when you actually do windrowing, but to avoid the scalding of the sun spoiling or the sunburn, you cover them with some hay or some grass, because we are Bajans, some grass, and you leave them so they don't get too much damage from the sun. All right, now in terms of drying your onions, you can, if you're doing it on indoors, you also need to look at the ventilation. The wire wrap allows the air to circulate around the bulb. So you're not going to just put it on a solid surface and leave it. Make sure that it has ventilation from underneath and above. You can also do solar drying in these contraptions that they have here. If you're thinking about getting to that level, we have the sun. You just need to have the container. Once again, drying, but under a covered area. Out of the sun, you could go and sleep, you don't have to worry. Okay? And once again, you will see here, this person did do the mesh at the bottom. So they don't have to worry at all. Everything is spread out sufficiently, so the onions are actually going to dry properly. Here you will realize then that they've actually topped the onions by cutting off the tops, and they've actually taken off the roots, like cut off the roots of the onions. So the onion doesn't have to worry about the leaves drying out, it just has to focus on the neck. If you have a makeshift idea, you can use this idea here, bricks, some pallets, enough space in between there, and do your own thing. Right? So for the storage, onions will store for up to 8 to 10 months, depending on the variety. So if you're going to pick a variety, it's only 6 months, don't say Julia's say it's going to be 10 months. Provided that they're treated correctly. If you harvest them correctly, you should not have a problem with it. During and after harvest, and to prevent sprouting. Okay, so you need to put it not in a damp area, if not you get sprouting. Onions grow slowly in cold temperatures, you already know this, and basically that's just a repetition more or less. And the storage, the onion tops should be allowed to mature well after harvesting. Before harvesting, care should be taken to avoid bruising during harvesting and packing. Storage places should be well ventilated to avoid accumulation of moisture on the surface of the bulb. Onions should be stored at 0 degrees Celsius and a relative humidity of 65 to 70%. So you have to have good dry area, not too much heat, and you need to watch for the moisture. That's all that's saying. Just watch for the moisture, watch for the temperature, and it should be a cool place. Same thing here in boxes, and they're all spaced out in between there. So this is more or less at the storing. These are dried, more or less, and they can now be stored. In conclusion, onions require a high level of management and considerable inputs, particularly in the area of pest disease and weed control. Adequate onion drying is necessary to minimize disease development after harvest, and production should be planned to avoid extended storage.